What is up, everyone? JD here. I hope you're all doing well today. Today, I'm really excited to bring you another Battle of the Blades. This one is going to be really good. I think a lot of folks that are interested in either one of these knives are interested in how this is going to shake down and probably really interested in getting a comparison of these two particular knives. Before I jump into that, I just want to preface it. Some of this is going to be subjective. It is going to be of my opinion and what I think about these knives. Some of it I tried very hard to be objective, so I tried to make sure that I didn't lean one way or the other for certain categories. Having said all of that, this is in good fun. Don't get bent out of shape if your knife doesn't win. It is just for entertainment value while also trying to get a serious look out of how these two compare to one another. If you enjoyed the video, do me a favor, leave a like. It does help me with the YouTube algorithm. Consider subscribing. I'd love to have you follow along, especially if you're enjoying the content. Why not? And turn that notification bell to all so you get alerts whenever new videos drop in case you want to check something else out. Having said all of that, let's meet today's contenders and find out what type of battle this is. This is going to be the first contender, and that is going to be the Civivi Altus. Civivi Altus weighs in, not quite there yet, is 7.12 inches overall with a 3-inch blade, 4.15-inch handles. Not going to get into the specifics yet because they are part of the other categories coming up. Next is the Kizer Original. I do have the original black, but there are other variants. Has a 2.98-inch blade, 6.85 inches overall in length, and has a 3.87-inch handle. So you can see these are very similar. There are some differences, but they're as close can get, in my opinion. What we're going to do is we're going to go section by section of the knife. That's how the categories are going to break down. Scales are 1 to 3, 1 being the worst, 3 being the best. Trying to keep it as simple as I can for myself and for you following along, hopefully. As we go through each section, again, I'll try to go over why I think one may be better than the other or why they're equal, etc. All right, so let's go ahead and get into this. All right, first category we're going to talk about is blades. So as I mentioned, the Civivi Altus has a 3-inch blade made from Nitro V steel. The Kizer Original has a 2.9-inch length blade made out of 154 cm. So the first category, I did score both the blade length 3s for both of these because I feel like if you are in a restricted area where 3-inch blade laws restrict you on what you can carry both of these knives, which is awesome. I also like the fact that they're 3 inches because it is a very friendly EDC sized knife. You can carry this with other stuff in the pocket. You can companion carry. You can primary carry with something like a Swiss Army knife. So it gives it a lot of versatility. It is still big enough though to handle most tasks, getting into packages, breaking down boxes, anything else, maybe some food prep, whatever else you could think of that you would want to do with your pocket tool, this would cover it. So both got a 3 for the length. And then the Nitro V and 154 cm, I mean, Civivi does a fantastic job with their Nitro V. My first experience with their Nitro V steel was actually with the Imperium. I've had that for almost a year now, and I really do love the way that steel performs. It takes a fantastic edge. It is screaming sharp. It is easy to sharpen, very tough, corrosive resistant. It is a fantastic steel. All of that I said about the Nitro V, you can say the exact same thing about 154 cm. So, in that respect, for what you get with these knives for the steels, it is that mid-tier in my opinion. I don't think it is a budget steel. I know some people say that it is, but I disagree. I think it is a mid-tier steel that is very well rounded and performs very well, and you get a lot of value for your money, and I think that's why some people may call them budget steels. So, having said all of that, they both get a 3. Now they are both tied at 6 points apiece. The other things that I wanted to cover with the steels, they're both drop points, which is a very versatile style blade. I like the drop on the Civivi a little bit more, but the Kaiser is a drop point as well, and they're going to both perform very similarly. So I felt like both got a 3 here. So now we're at 9 points apiece. So this is going to be a tight battle, as you can see as we go through this. It will shake out a little bit when we get to other categories, but I think for the overarching and main similarities, that's probably why you're seeing that they're matching. Both have flat grinds. Both got a 3 because it is a very well done flat grind. Very thin, very slicey. So both are going to be sitting at 12 points apiece. So still tied after covering everything so far on the blades themselves. Now let's talk about cutting edge. I've had the opportunity to use both of these. I've had the Civivi a little bit longer, and I've had the Kaiser Original for, about a week, not quite a week yet, almost a week. I've really found, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's because of Civivi's ability to put their edge on that Nitro V, or if there's something perhaps not quite as laid back with the 154cm, because I've had good experience with 154cm, but I'm finding on my particular variant and my particular example that the 154cm was not going through the material quite as smooth as it was with the Nitro V, which really surprised me because, again, I've handled plenty of 154cm blade steels and they usually perform really well. So maybe it is my version, but the Nitro V does feel smoother. While they both go through good, and because they're thin, they do slice well, it just feels like the Nitro V performed a little bit better. So it is going to be Nitro V3, 154cm 2. So this is where they're starting to get some separation. We'll see how the other categories shake out because there's still plenty to go over. So we're now sitting with the Altus at 18 and the original at 17, which is still a really close race. Let's talk about the pivot action and everything surrounding the pivot itself. Both have ceramic bearings, so both get a 3. That puts the Altus at 21, and that puts the original at 20. They both have button lock systems, but there is a little bit of a difference that I wanted to talk about here. So when it comes to the button lock, you will see that the original has a rounded or coned button lock that does raise up slightly above the recess when deployed. And when you get over to the Elementum, it also does slightly raise up over top, but it has a textured or milled button that is indented. So they are a little bit different. The other things that I wanted to talk about is the tension on the actual locks. The lock on the Civivi is much stiffer, and therefore it results in a much snappier action than the Kaiser. The Kaiser's is probably a medium tension, which may help if you're pushing into the thumb studs, but I feel like from a deployment perspective, just, you can fail it, whereas I feel like if you push light, you can't really get this to deploy. You have to actually give it the full gas. So I don't know, that can be probably a little subjective, but I'm just saying I feel like the button lock system is a little bit better on the Altus than it is on my original. I do like the cone. That does feel nice, but I really do like the fact there's a little bit of texturing and micro milling on the Altus button, because that gives me just a little bit more surface to grab onto, being that it's flat, where if it's rounded, I guess you could potentially slip off of it a little bit and not really get a full grip on the locks. So for the actual button lock itself, I did give the Altus the 3 and I gave the original the 2. So that puts the Altus at 24 and that puts the original at 22. Now let's talk about action, which is a result of the spring stiffness. There's two things here that I wanted to cover. Again, just briefly touching back on the fact that the Altus feels snappier because it does have more spring tension, but the original doesn't have that drop shut action. Now, I've only had it for, like I said, just under a week, so maybe it'll improve. I did try to back it off just a touch, and what I was finding is that just moving it any further over was causing the pivot to back out. I did also put some blue Loctite on there to try to help remedy that, but it seems like the vibration from opening into the stop pin is shaking it just enough for it to still want to come loose. I can try to put a little bit more Loctite on there and leave it for 2 days instead of for overnight, and that might resolve it, but I have not had to do any of that with the Altus out of the box. And I think part of the reason for that is that it does have that captive pivot. You don't have to worry about it sitting on top of the scale like you do with the original. You just have the one side, well, I guess they're on the opposite side. You just have the one side that sits on top. I think that plays a little bit of a factor. I think the other thing too, though, is both these materials probably offer equal amount of grip. With the G10 and the micarta version, you probably would get even more grip, so you probably could tune this a little bit better. Now, as far as the action, the Altus, I have had it a month, but it did come out of the box pretty drop shut. They both stay in the upwards position when you first undo the buttons. I'm going to offset these a little bit. I give them a little bit of an angle, and the Altus falls shut, and I'm still trying to give, there you go. So I do think it's a little bit smoother, but I do recognize the original could potentially continue to break in. Both are coated blades, and again, I've noticed since I've had this out of the box, it was just smoother. It's a much smoother action. The bearing system is a little bit better tuned on the Altus. So I did give that to the Altus. That puts the Altus at 27 and the original at 24. All right, so let's talk about these deployments. They both have thumb studs, and they both have the thumb lock. They both have the button lock option, meaning you can use the button lock to deploy and close both of these. Ooh, it might help if I went in the right direction. Sorry, I just opened the last one, so I went for the close first. So you can use the button lock like you could the Elementum button lock that was released last year. So both have really nice fidget factors. I did give I did actually give the Kaiser a 3, though, on the thumb studs, because if you look really closely, you'll notice that these are a little bit thicker and a little bit more rounded. If you look at the Altus isn't as rounded, and it's a little bit lower. And what I have found is when you go to deploy the Altus, because of the fact that they're not quite tall enough, you do get a little bit of sharpness. And as you can see from where I've been fidgeting with these this weekend, well, this is probably beyond this, it does kind of dig into the fingers a little bit. And I feel like, and again, only a week now, I do feel like it's a little bit more comfortable, or it's a little bit more of a approachable angle with the black, where it's not quite that action, where it's not quite as pokey. So I did give this the 3, and I did give the Altus a 2 for the actual thumb studs. So just looking at the thumb studs, that puts the Altus at 29, and it brings the original up to 27. So the original is making up some ground. Now, again, going back to the buttons, I did hit on this a little bit earlier, but I noticed that with the button deployment, because it is recessed so much, whereas you have more of a low profile button here and you do have less recess, you have a taller, thicker button and it is more recessed. It also protrudes completely out, where it's flush, entirely flush on the Altus, but it does raise up slightly on the original. When you're actually flipping these, you do have to actually push further down because of the taller recess in the aluminum, but you don't have to push quite as far in the Elementum, the Altus, because of the fact that it is a more shallow recess and a more shallow button. So you're almost right there, and it does feel like it's a little bit easier to deploy it that way. So the Altus made up a little bit ground back because of the button having 3 points now being at 32, whereas the original, the button lock itself got 2 for the deployment means, putting it at 29. So again, 32-29 in favor of the Altus. Now let's go ahead and talk about the other half of the knife. We're going to talk about handles. Again, 4.15 inch on the Altus, 3.87 on the original. The Altus, again, being available with wood, G10, or micarta. You only can get aluminum. As of the making of this battle, you can only get aluminum from the Kizer. We're going to talk about ergos. Ergos goes to the Altus. The Altus feels really good in hand. It has a little bit of contouring. It does lock your fingers into position. It's a little tight on that back spot, but it does fit, and I have larger hands. You can see it's really close, but it does fit. The other thing that I like about the ergos is it naturally puts you really close to the blade's edge when you're using the finger guard. Now, the original is more neutral, more boxy looking, so you do just get a little bit of contouring underneath the fingers, but the back is perfectly straight. You can put your finger in the guard, but when you do that, for me, I end up with 3 1/4 grip, which makes sense because I mentioned the length being 4.15 inches versus 3.87. The other thing about the original is it puts you way back in the neutral position away from the blade's edge. Now, it does give you this flat ramp and you can move up, but look how close you are to the blade's edge, and just a little bit of a slip and you're going to fall into that blade, especially if you're trying to do a puncture task to start your cut. The other thing is that if you do choke up on that flat spot, you're now sitting directly over top of the button, which is a little unsettling because I actually did try to move up to break down a piece of cardboard, and when I went to squeeze for the push cut, I actually felt the button go in and I stopped immediately. I don't know that it would deploy, but just a little bit of the button causes it to start to move, and I don't want that to happen. I feel like this is more for like some detailed work. If you were trying to do something with the tip and you wanted to be very precise and very cautious, this would be a good way to choke up. I did find when I was messing around with the cardboard a little bit more is that when you move back and you actually split the difference of the finger guard, you actually are able to get a full 4-finger grip. You're able to put that finger just behind the button where you don't engage it and bring your thumb down to help make sure it doesn't slide, and it puts it in the blade path. But it's a little awkward feeling because you don't have anything supporting the back of the index and the front of the middle finger. So it's a little uncomfortable for me. Now, if you have smaller hands, that might not be the case. But I did feel like that was just a little unusual. So I did give ergos to the Altus, and I think that little bit of extra real estate plus the little bit of contouring plus the finger guard or the finger cutout is in the better spot. It is closer to the blade's edge without having to choke up. So that now puts 3 points to the Altus, giving it 35 points, 2 points because it's not horrible, it's just a little uncomfortable and a little awkward. So 2 points, putting it at 31. Materials, I had to give that to the Altus because as of the making of this video, you can get it in wood, G10, or micarta. So 3 points, giving it 38, and the original having well done coated aluminum, it does feel plenty tacky enough. And again, if you're using it so hard where you're going beyond the limits of the coated aluminum, this is probably not the right knife for you anyway. But I did give it, again, a 2 for that. So it's at 33 points. Now, let's talk about pocket clips, because I really wanted to highlight and emphasize the pocket clips on these two knives. First up, we're going to talk about the original. The original's design is one of my favorites. It's inset with recessed bolts. It is flat, so it's really not something that's going to poke into you in hand. The Altus has a contoured doubled over pocket clip that comes up, which is not really my favorite design. It does have recessed screws in the pocket clip, but it is flush mounted sitting on top, which I thought was a little weird because the scales are quite thick, so you could have recessed it a little bit to make it completely flat. So from a design perspective, I gave this to the original because I feel like it has the better design. So 3 points to the original for design, giving it 36. 2 to the Elementum because it's not the best, but it is still a deep carry pocket clip, and it does still have the recessed screws, so when it goes to the function, that's going to play a factor. So that gave it 40 points. So now the original 36, the Altus has 40 points. Now let's talk about functionality. Functionality, the actual pocket clip on the Altus works really well. It does come up high enough to where you can put this in and out of the pocket with one hand. It does go all the way to the edge. It does not catch, so that opening is big enough to where it slides in. So from a functionality standpoint, I gave the Altus a 3. Works really well. That gives the Altus 43 points. Now, with the original, I think they may have missed the intent of having this clip because the bill is actually too close to the handle. This knife, I have not been able to put in any pocket or any knife roll without having to use a second hand to get it to start. I really don't understand why they built it so low profile. I feel like that is a complete miss. They just needed to come up to match the height of the actual pocket clip on this particular design. It is a 1 because I have not been able to use this one-handed. I feel like that is a complete and total miss, and it's very tough to even get under there with a fingernail. I feel like I'm gonna pull my fingernail back just to try to pull it back to release some tension to make it looser to see if that will help with it catching. I've done that a little bit, didn't want to break the pocket clip. It has not helped. So I did give it a 1, giving it 37. So now we're sitting at 43 to 37. The Altus still is holding the lead. Let's talk about looks. Now this is definitely one that is totally subjective. I feel like it all depends on what you like. If you like something very, very neutral that doesn't have a lot of flair, doesn't have a lot to it, if you're a banter kind of person, you're probably going to pick the original. I feel like the Altus has the better looking drop point. I love the blade shape. It also puts the tip down lower from a user perspective. I like the cutout and the actual knockdown here to get to the thumb stud. I think it looks nice, and again, from a function perspective. I'm not really going into the material, the wood, the G10, the micarta versus the aluminum. I'm talking strictly about the shape of the knife. I also think that Civivi did a better job here with the ergos and the lines on the handle. I'm not really sure who designed the original, but it just looks a little odd because it's straight across here and then it's super curvy here, and it has a lot of belly here, which from an ergos perspective does help. But when you look at these two dead on, I just feel like, to me, the Altus is just far better looking. So I did, from a looks perspective, give the Altus a 3, giving it 46 points. And I figured since the original was okay, wasn't off-putting, but it wasn't like something that necessarily caught my eye, I gave it 2 points, giving it 39. Now let's talk about weight. I don't remember what the weight is on the original or the Altus, so I am going to bring the scale out, and we're going to do this in twofold. We're going to talk about what the claimed weight was versus the actual weight. So I am going to talk about claimed weight first. Claimed weight on the original is 2.6 ounces. Based on claim weight, I gave it a 3. So let's see if it's going to match up. So it does, 2.6 ounces, perfect. And if I remember, the Altus did hit its claimed weight, which was 2.8. So let's just double check that. 2.8. So they both hit their claim weight, which is always great to see from a manufacturer. That is exactly what you want, is what was advertised, right? So a 3 because the original is lighter, which makes sense because it is a little bit smaller and it is made from aluminum, which is a lighter material. I gave the Altus a 2 because it still manages to be under 3 ounces, which is that featherweight lightweight. So now we're sitting at 48 points to the Altus and 42 points to the original. And we're entering into the very last category, and that's cost. So again, just to recap, you get 154 cm aluminum and a button lock with the original. You get Nitro V with either wood, G10, or micarta with the Altus. With that being said, it doesn't matter which variant you pick up of the Altus from Civivi, it is cheaper, which is mind-blowing. The original's advertised price is $84 on Mojave Outdoors website. Now, of course, you can use a couple of different subscribers' codes to go out to Mojave Outdoors and get a little bit of a discount, but I'm just going off of price as listed on the website. If you check out the Altus is $73 for the G10 variant, which is really probably the better variant because it is textured G10. Civivi does a really good job giving you that texture without it being like sandpaper to your pocket to make it hard or make it difficult getting it in and out. So 3 points to the Altus for being cheaper, even if you go with the more expensive variant. The wood one, I think, ended up being 76. The original gets 2 points because it is much more expensive. So the end result and your winner is the Civivi Altus with 51 points and the Kizer original getting 44. A bit of a blowout if you ask me. That's a pretty big difference. Not close enough to where the original could have made it up or made up ground with the price. Now, again, some of this is going to be subjective and some of this is very objective, like price. Price is objective. Offering, you get more variants to choose from with the Altus. The other thing too is some of this could be the example of the knife that I got. Again, this is not very fall shut. I do think it'll break in more, but I do also feel it rotating on the bearing. So I do hope that that goes away. I can't loosen it any more than I have because the pivot starts to back out. I will try a little bit more Loctite, but again, experience right out of the box. I didn't have to do any of that with the Altus, and the Altus has remained dead center. So that's my thoughts, my impressions. If this helped, I hope it did. Do me a favor and leave that like for me. I really do appreciate the support. Who would you have picked? Leave your choice in the comments down below. Let me know who you picked, who you liked, what variant you like, because again, as of March 14th, they were coming back with the black. They had the coated blade with the green, or they had the uncoated blade with the gray handle. And I'm sure if this continues to do well, they'll continue to bring it into stock. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate all the support. I hope all of you have a fantastic week. I hope you enjoyed this and had fun with it. Until next time, peace.